Hey, what's up guys? I'm Josh, and this is the Denon D5200, and I want to thank my friend Israel for letting me borrow his headphone here. Now, this is one of the more surprising headphones that I've come across in a while, and that's for a couple reasons, but you need to understand a little bit of back history before I explain that. So the back history is that Fostex actually manufactures all of Denon's headphones. That's why they look so similar, but with some slight tweaks like we'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about the build. Now, what makes this important for me is that coming into this review, I was expecting not necessarily a knockoff Fostex, but I was expecting it to be a not as good version of Fostex. And I like some Fostex, but they're kind of hit or miss for me, but I was expecting it to not really be that phenomenal. But to me, this actually comes across as the more buttoned up final version of what those headphones desire to be. It doesn't have any of the major drawbacks that a lot of the Fostex headphones come with. And it also keeps all the benefits that Fostex is known for. So this to me, while it's a pretty expensive headphone, is a pretty good one. And I actually like this thing more than I thought I would. This thing is on what I would consider to be the right side of a V-shaped headphone. It's still gonna be a V-shape. Still people who don't like V-shaped are not gonna like it, and people who do like V-shaped are gonna like it. But I think there's a good way and a bad way to do a V-shaped headphone. One is to go a little bit over the top and kind of, create a bloaty bass and a sharp treble response. You could think of something like a DT1770 Pro. That headphone, in my opinion, is a little bit overkill on both sides. And this is more similar to me to something like this Sony Z7, which is another headphone that is closed in this price range that I actually really like. This is more comparable to that. I think on any given day, I would probably pick the Z7 over this, but this is real close behind. And I think comparing it to some of its Fostex brothers and sisters, this is closer to the XOO line than it is the typical Fostex line, at least the ones that I've reviewed on this channel, though it is notable that I have not tried every Fostex headphone, mostly because I don't seek them out because I don't really favor them that highly. But I actually consider this to be a much more subtle, nuanced, and again, more kind of a buttoned up sound than a lot of those other Fostex headphones. So let's go ahead and talk about the design and the build, which is sort of hit or miss for me. On one hand, they improved the general design of a Fostex headphone with one particular feature, and that's going to be the headband. They actually added padding underneath the headband, and that's something that I think Fostex should have done years and years ago, rather than having the stitching. But other than that, the general fit and the pad feeling is very similar. It still has these weirdly shaped pads with a thicker back than the front, and they still kind of feel like they're bulging behind your ears. It's still a fit that I have to adjust to every time I listen to it, but it's not terrible, I don't think. Now you can see some of the things like the cup yokes are a little bit different, but in general, you can tell that this is just a modified Fostex headphone because it is a modified Fostex headphone. Last note before we talk about sound, let's talk about amplification. You're good to roll with just about anything on these. These are a very efficient pair of headphones. I can listen to these on an iPhone. I can listen to them on a high-end headphone amp and be happy with both results. I'm actually pretty impressed with how easy it is to drive these things. What are the inherent fixes that they've done over some other Fostex headphones? Then we'll get into more nuances versus other things in the market. So what they've fixed is this doesn't hit as hard or sloppily in the bass response. It's a little bit cleaner and a little bit less than some of the other Fostex headphones that are really, really bassy, but it does maintain clarity in positions that those don't. And I feel like that is also true with the treble response, where the treble response on a lot of Fostex headphones can be way, way too much, especially seemingly as you get higher in their lineup. Now it's still a little forward in some areas, and I'll explain those in a second, but it's not nearly as aggressive on either side as a general Fostex headphone. But this does keep some benefits like an overall warm signature to the sound, good sound staging, and a very open stage at that, given that this is a closed back headphone. This doesn't sound claustrophobic or enclosed at all. It actually stages really nicely with good representation in every single direction, good separation between all the instruments, a good depth and clarity to everything. It's quite impressive actually. So the sound staging, I would actually describe it as pretty circular. Sometimes with these closed back headphones, you get more of a pill shape where it's a little bit longer on the sides and a little bit thinner in the front and back. But in this particular case, I actually think this is very well rounded and actually makes for an excellent movie and gaming headphone. The treble response is not the clearest thing at this price range. They have a decent amount of treble forwardness, and you can pick up a pretty wide range of frequencies, including your upper air frequencies. You're going to be able to pick that out in this. And then it does have one minor issue with the upper end of vocals, where sometimes they come across with a little bit extra energy than I would consider to be a reference standard or perfect. Now, this unfortunately is not even kind of unique to Fostex headphones. A lot of closed-back headphones, even at this price, suffer from that issue. This one is unfortunately no exception. Mid-range is not this headphone's bread and butter. That being said, knowing that that's not kind of the main thing that this headphone does, I don't find it to be terrible. And I think I don't find it to be terrible because I don't find it to be overly offensive. And I actually find what quality is there is fairly high quality stuff. One of the aspects of the vocalist that I really like is the representation. So it's really taking advantage of that sphere. So even though it's not kind of, center and attention grabbing in your head and really gripping your ears, it does feel like you're getting a little bit of focus. It's not crazy over the top. It's not the best thing at this price. It's just, you feel like you get a little bit of focus on the vocalists and they weren't forgotten about. And you still get nuances, you still get subtleties of the vocalists, and you don't feel like they're completely stepped back in the background. There's still a decent amount of separation, which is pretty impressive and entirely due to the soundstaging capability of this thing, which is awesome. Speaking of awesome, bass response. If you like bass, Fostex headphones have a lot of bass. They're very good at it, especially that XO Ebony, which is unfortunately not made. It's just a lot of bass. So if you're really big on bass and you're willing to deal with maybe not a perfect clarity in the bass response, a little bit of bloatiness, I think Fostex headphones are the way to go. This headphone isn't as intense as those, but it's still what I would consider to be a bassy headphone. This still hits really, really hard. No matter how much you're pushing through it, it's going to be able to keep up with just about everything with a little bit of bass bloat. But overall layering and quality and positioning of the bass response is admittedly pretty good for the price. I don't find the tonal properties to be massively different than other Fostex headphones. And that is to say that it's not really super high scoring for me for timbre or tonality. It's just kind of average for the price range that this thing is coming in at. It's not anything that I would go out of my way to complain about, but it's also not something that I would go out of my way to praise. So at the end of this review, I'm stuck with expectations that I have that were proven false, and a headphone that I feel like I can now pretty confidently recommend as like a good movie headphone or a good gaming headphone, or just a good music headphone for somebody who wants a V-shaped headphone. I think that the Z7 probably has a little bit better kind of mid-range presence, and that's why I would pick it. It just seems to be a little bit more well-rounded, not quite as committed to the V-shape as this particular headphone is. But I wouldn't mind advising somebody to get this thing because I actually think it sounds pretty wonderful if you like that type of sound signature and doesn't have the massive pitfalls that I would normally tell people to watch out for. All right, I think that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Israel, for lending this to me to review. And until the next video, guys, my name's Josh, signing off. Peace.